Hello, everyone. Is this exciting? All right. I'm going to do a couple quick announcements and then introduce our author today. So first and foremost is your safety. So in the event that we do have a safety issue and we have to evacuate, either come down to these exits at the bottom, or if you're up towards the top, exit down the stairs that you came in at and go slowly and carefully because we want to stay safe. So what are the two best ways to get people out of their offices right here at Lawrence Livermore Lab? Free stuff and food, and we have both for you today. So just a reminder, in addition to the book, you can get it signed after the talk over at the West Cafe, and if you don't have time to get it signed, there are some book cards that you can get on your way out, or book plates, I think they're called. And so we do have those for you. But over at the West Cafe, we actually have some paleo food for you to sample. So enjoy that as well. And so I have to say, I am just so excited to have Michelle Tam here. The healthy eating and exercising is something that I love, but I certainly don't cook as healthy as this book, but I love the layout. And I have the older book. I know many of you got the newer book as well, which now I'm going to have to get. So enjoy. So I'm going to just actually read from the bio just so I don't say anything wrong. But Michelle Tam and her husband Henry Fong are the creators of the Saveur Award-winning blog NON-NEGOTIABLE. Together, they've also produced a Webby Award-winning cookbook cooking app, authored 2 New York Times best-selling cookbooks, and have been nominated for a James Beard Award, which is kind of like the Oscars for food. So currently, they have a nationwide partnership with Whole Foods Market for the month of January. So you need to get out there in the next few days because you can find their Nom Paleo picks throughout the store. There's recipes from their new cookbook, Ready or Not, at the Hot Bar, and her famous magic mushroom powder, which is non-hallucinogenic, by the way. You would still pass the drug test. And it's completely legal. It's a seasoning salt, and it's stocked up at the butcher counter. So she's been dubbed the Martha Stewart of Paleo by the New York Times and CBS News. Michelle is the food nerd behind Nom Paleo's recipes and personality. Her obsessions include dark chocolate, trashy reality television, and miniature toy food from Japan. Michelle has a degree in nutrition and food science from UC Berkeley and a doctorate in pharmacy from UCSF. For a dozen years, she actually worked the graveyard shift at Stanford Hospital as their night pharmacist. And that was before she started her side hustle, which is now her real hustle. And so with that, please welcome Michelle Tam.
Thank you. Well, hello everybody, and thank you for coming. So how many of you guys have heard of paleo? Oh, good. I wasn't quite sure. I was like, oh, they're here for the free cookbook. And so today I'm going to be talking about how to stock your paleo kitchen like a boss. And so these are kind of, I'm going to go, oh, am I doing this right? I'm going to do this. So this is what's I'm going to be covering today, or what's on the menu, because Henry, my husband, who people always think that Nom Paleo is just me because they see, the cartoon and the avatar of me, but it really is a mom and pop operation. Henry has a real job, and so during the day he has his real job doing his lawyerly things. But at night and on the weekends and any other moment, he's helping me with the design of all the books, the photos, the cartoons. And so almost anything people like about Nom Paleo, it's what Henry does. So I always want to put that out there. But he's not here because he's at his day job. I'll talk a little bit about who I am. And then the controversial question, like, what is paleo? And you'll see that I am probably the least dogmatic paleo person out there. And I'll tell you what I consider paleo, but again, I'm not trying to convince anybody here to go paleo or to do anything that they don't want to do. You do you is my motto. And then, as I said before, I'm going to be talking about how to stock your paleo kitchen like a boss, and that means getting to the meat of the matter, pun intended, and talking about nutrient-dense foods that you should be stocking, flavor boosters, which are really important to me because that's what makes your food taste good, and if it doesn't taste good, you're not going to be making it yourself. Snacks and drinks, because I have a lot of people ask me, like, what should I snack on? Can I drink alcohol? And so I'll talk about that. And then I'll leave some time at the end for a Q&A. So this is me, except I never age, and I never have to dye my hair. And that's part of the reason why I love that Henry has this little cartoon of me. And people are like, how come you have a cartoon of you? And I'm like, because Henry is very talented. And ever since we met as freshmen at Cal, he's always been artistic, but he decided to kind of do the practical thing. But ever since we were freshmen, he was drawing a cartoon for the Daily Cal, and I was one of the characters. And so he's been drawing a version of me for like 25 years. You can do the math and figure out how old I am. And so, as mentioned before, I am a former zombie drug dealer because I used to work nights at Stanford Hospital as the graveyard pharmacist. I am a self-taught home cook. My sister likes me to put that up there because she is an actual chef. And so when people mistakenly call me a chef, she's like, you are not a chef, you are just a home cook. And I'm like, no, it's true. I am not a chef. A chef is an actual person that has been trained properly, runs a kitchen, and I don't do that. In fact, I don't even like cooking that much. I have a very adventurous palate, and I will travel all over the world to kind of eat. Henry likes to tell the story about how we went to Florence, and I just wanted to go find this Bolito Misto place, and he's like, why don't we see David? And I'm like, why? There's a replica right here in the hotel. There's really no reason to do that. I am literally one picky mother. I am it's not that I won't eat anything, because I will. If you pay me $1, I'll probably try whatever. But I do want food to taste really good. I am very picky about how my food tastes, and that's why my recipes I test over and over and over again, and my family is sick of it. And I have 2 kids, one of which is just as picky as me. So everything that is in my cookbooks and in my blog and on the app have been tested numerous times by me and by my kids and by my recipe tester. So hopefully they'll work for you guys on the first time, because I know how frustrating it is to get a new recipe and buy all these expensive ingredients and spend all this time, and then it just flops and you're like, I'm never going to cook again, because I was that person, because I am inherently lazy. I do work really hard, and I think from, just kind of reading my resume, oh, you probably worked really hard, and I did, but I also had very strict parents. But deep down, I'm very lazy. If I could just sit on the couch and have people cook me my meals, I would do that. But once I discovered paleo in 2010, I realized that it was hard to go out and eat paleo because it's hard to do. It's easier now, but I was like, shoot, I'm going to have to learn how to cook. And with all of these kind of things, I was working nights, I had 2 kids, I was like, how am I going to do this? And so I started this blog. I was like, because I felt so great when I became, I changed what I ate, I felt like I was in the Matrix. And I was like, oh my gosh, all this stuff that everyone has been telling me is healthy and I would just blindly follow, it's not true. At least for me, it wasn't true. And so I just started our blog, and Henry has always wanted me to do a blog because he was blogging ever since forever. He had one of the original daddy blogs, and then he had a fitness blog. And then one day I was like, I want to do a paleo food blog. And he's like, really? I'm like, yeah. He's like, what would you call it? I'm like, non-paleo. And he's like, what is that? He's like, nom-nom is that really catchy phrase, when something's so delicious, you're like, nom, 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 nom. And he's like, oh, that's great. And now it's one of the most hated phrases in food writing, but I digress. And so he got the domain name for me, and he got me a Tumblr site because Tumblr he knew was like super easy. And so I was just posting stuff like what I was eating, and it was really personal for me. It was just like, okay, these are places that I've gone out to eat. This is what you can eat there. This is what I ate for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, just because I was like, oh, I don't, this might be useful to someone. And I used to swear on the blog all the time because I didn't think anyone read it. And I have since scrubbed all the bad words out. But that is just kind of how it started. And so I know how hard it is to cook when you're busy and you have kids and you're picky and you don't have time. And so that's why in all our books, everything is step by step. We try to make it not dogmatic. We try to make, the recipes work. And we, put in little cartoons and jokes just so it's kind of encouraging and not anything too crazy. So here's kind of like the million-dollar question, like, what is paleo? Because, different people say different things and things change. Like, people are like, I thought potatoes weren't paleo. How come you're saying they're paleo? Or this person says this is paleo. And so for me, I just say that you should prioritize whole, unprocessed, nutrient-rich, nourishing foods, like the ones pictured here. And so that means, prioritizing eating lots of vegetables, eating grass-fed and pastured meats and eggs, wild-caught seafood, healthy fats. Fermented foods are really important to have in your diet. Fruits, nuts, seeds, and spices. So in other words, you just want to eat more in line with what your ancestors ate before the advent of all this hyper-processed, hyper-palatable food that you can find kind of in the middle aisles of the grocery store. And these are the foods that you should avoid. And sometimes people are like, don't take away my whole grains. And I understand, I was that person. I used to eat whole grains morning, noon, and night. But I didn't realize that was probably what was contributing to all my joint pain, all this GI distress, and all this, the spikes in my insulin and all this stuff that was happening. So there are some foods that when regularly and heavily consumed, like grains, dairy, soy, sugar, and processed seed and vegetable oils, some of those are shown to trigger inflammation, cause digestive problems, or derail our natural metabolic processes. So I always recommend, if you're going to try this out, just try it for 30 days where you pull these things out. You can do something like a Whole30. Like people say, well, how is paleo different from a Whole30? And Whole30 is more like a strict 30-day reset. And Melissa Hartwig, who developed it, has very strict guidelines, which are good. Some people want the rules. But then for me, I think paleo, at least for me, is just how you kind of live your life outside of the 30 days. Like you could keep it Whole30 forever, but even Melissa Hartwig says it's not a whole 365. Like once the Whole30 is over and you're out in the real world, you have to navigate and figure out what works for you. And everybody is a unique snowflake. And some people can tolerate certain foods that other people can't. But you have to figure those things out for yourself. And the best way to do it is kind of do like this kind of self-experiment for 30 days where you're nourishing your body with like healthy foods. And then once it's over, you can systematically add back one of those things just to see how you feel. Because you're like, oh, I didn't realize that this food made me feel terrible and makes me fall asleep, an hour after I eat it. I mean, there's just all these things where I'm like, oh, like you'll feel like you're living the Matrix. I'm not even kidding you. So these are my non-paleo guidelines, right? The caveman is just a mascot. People say, well, the caveman died when they were 35, and why aren't you eating bugs? I'm like, because I don't want to. Like, I love living in the 21st century. Like, I love having a ring that tells me how much sleep I'm getting. I love technology. But I think there's a lot to be learned from our ancestors. And like, your mom is probably right, your grandma's probably right about eating whole foods. I'm not about restricting what you eat to as little as possible, because you could just eat boiled broccoli and chicken breast, and that would be paleo, but it's not the most nutrient-dense or pleasurable way to eat, and it's definitely not sustainable. So I think you just need to figure out for you how you can eat as broadly but as healthfully as possible. And I always talk about striving for progress, not paleo perfection. And that's why, like on my Instagram and in my Instagram stories, I show people, hey, I'm at this gluten-free bakery, and this is what I'm eating. I don't eat it all the time, but I'm making a mindful choice to eat this. And so, you know, just so people know, you don't have to worry about being perfect. And if you've done like a Whole30 and suddenly you fall into a big plate of pizza, that's okay. Your next meal can be a healthy meal. Like, you just, that is just how you should think about it, because it's a long-term lifestyle change, and it needs to be simple, quick, and crazy delicious. So more so than, I think, turning people paleo or telling people, no, you have to go paleo, I think the most important thing is that people need to get back in the kitchen and start cooking, because the healthiest meal is the one that you make yourself and the one where you know what the ingredients are. And it all starts with food. I mean, obviously, sleep is really important, having a great community is important, keeping your stress levels important, exercise is important, but how you fuel yourself is really, really important. And I used to just disregard that. I used to just say, oh, you know, this label says it's only 100 calories, or it says that it's healthy. I'm just gonna eat it and not even think about how I feel. And so I think that's kind of the change that happened when I kind of went paleo. I'm like, whoa, I'm reading labels, and why does this have this in here? Like, that's so strange. I don't know what these ingredients are. And when I eat this, I don't feel great. And every time I eat this, this happens. And I just think it's just being mindful of, you know, how food impacts you that's really important. And I think a lot of people have just said, I don't know, this is what my doctor tells me, or this is what I'm reading. But I think people need, you know, agency again. And practice makes perfect. A lot of people, it is so easy to outsource and like have stuff delivered. Like, I know, because I used to be like, I'm so busy. I work nights, I have 2 kids, and I'm just gonna have stuff delivered. And every time I cook, it would suck. And so then, you know, it's just like any other thing, right? Like, the more you practice it, the better you get. And so Sam Sifton, the food editor of the New York Times, wrote, cooking is a practice. It's the same as Buddhism, CrossFit, or sobriety. You just have to do it until it's what you do. Don't start tomorrow, start today. And just realize there are times when your recipes are not gonna be great, but the next time it'll get better. I mean, it's like anything. It's like riding a bike, I mean, and practicing science, like all the stuff, the hard stuff you guys do, it got easier as you guys kept on doing it. And so I'm gonna teach you guys how to stock your kitchen to ensure success. And eventually cooking will be, okay, it might not be super fun. Like, people are like, you must love cooking. And I'm like, no, I don't love cooking. But now I know what to do, and I know that it'll be tasty, and my family will eat it. So the big questions are, like, what food should I stockpile in my fridge, freezer, and pantry? So, you know, the main one is like protein, fruits and vegetables, healthy fats, because there are healthy fats. Like, for a long time, because I have a nutrition and food science major from the 90s, like, fats were terrible and bad, but it's not true. Fermented foods, I think, are really important to incorporate into your diet, and I'll talk about that. Nuts and seeds, flavor boosters, super important, drinks, and snacks. So you can see, like, I'm in front of, like, my pantry, but it's never that clean, just so you know. In fact, I made Henry put, like, a big cartoon of me in front of it, because it's all messy right behind there. So protein. So the most sustainable and nourishing and flavorful animal protein comes from healthy beasts that feast on whatever nature intended for them to eat. So I do think that if you are, it's not like you have to have, like, eat tons of meat. In fact, there are perfectly healthy people who never eat red meat. If you eat a ton of, like, mussels and seafood, and you eat organ meats or whatever, like, you can eat a great variety of foods and have it be really nutrient dense. But I do think it's important to care how those animals were raised, because, like, you're only gonna be as healthy as the health of the animals that you're eating. And so you should prioritize grass-fed and grass-finished beef, lamb, and goat, pastured poultry and eggs, sustainable seafood, but the bottom line is you do the best you can. Like, if it's hard to find or it's too expensive, that's okay. Like, you know what you're striving towards. And there are, you know, it is easier these days to go to the store and find stuff. Like, for example, at Whole Foods, They do have, the ranking of how the different proteins are raised. So pretty quickly and easily you can say, oh, that's step 4, that's step 5. I know that's pasture-based. If you go to the farmer's market, you can talk to your local farmer to see how they raise their meat. There are butcher shops like Belcampo where they are totally all about making sure the animals are raised the right way. But I know, like, good protein is expensive. And so here are some ways that I save money, because I was raised by thrifty Chinese immigrants, and I now am a thrifty Chinese mom. And so I buy a ton of ground meat, because ground meat is always the cheapest. And you can get high quality ground beef, at the store, like that's 100% grass-fed and grass-finished. Braising cuts are my favorite. So these are cuts that you cook low and slow or in a pressure cooker, and they taste super delicious if you cook them properly, and they're always, always cheaper. And that includes like oxtails, pork shoulder, like almost anything with a bone that takes a long time to cook. It's cheaper. And it's really delicious, and it's got all that collagen. Like, everyone's all excited about collagen peptides and buying all these fancy powders. If you just eat those cuts, you naturally get them, so. And then if you do want steaks, like, the only time my kids really get steak is if they go to my mom's house, because she spoils them with like filet mignon. But in my house, you eat like ground meat. But if you do want steak, these cuts, the Denver, Bavette, and Velvet steak, are unusual steak cuts that are cheaper. And you can cook them just like a filet or a ribeye. Chicken and eggs are also cheaper. Like, they're cheaper to get higher quality than, say, beef or goat or lamb. And bone-in cuts are always cheaper, and you can repurpose the bones for stock. Like, I love chicken thighs, and I always buy them with the skin on, with the bone in, and if you take out the bone, you can make all these crackling chicken, which is like the best dish ever. But you can stockpile all those bones and use those to make stock later. And basically, like, you can buy whole chickens. Whole chickens are always going to be cheaper than cut up chicken. But when you buy the boneless, skinless breast, like, not only is that less nutritious and it doesn't taste as good, I mean, that's going to be the most expensive cut. And always stock up when there's a sale. I have a chest freezer in my garage that anytime I see a sale, I'm the crazy person that's like, I'm going to take all the ground beef. And so this is something I used to do when I used to work nights. You can see I'm wearing my blue scrubs. But it was this concept of this defrost bowl. So because I had all this frozen meat, at the beginning of my work week, I would just go and I would just dump a bunch of meat into a stainless steel bowl. And so then throughout the week, whatever was defrosted when I woke up before I went to work, that's what I was going to cook with. And it always has to be a bowl, because a colander, like, no matter what, like frozen meat, there's always a hole in there. I don't even know how it happens, but if you leave it on your fridge to defrost, it just oozes everywhere. So always make sure it's a bowl, not a colander. But this would force me to cook it like whenever I woke up, and it would keep me from getting takeout, and then you use up what you're actually buying. And so I do love the idea of emergency protein, because this way you can quickly have protein, because I feel like protein is almost harder to have on hand ready to eat than, say, vegetables or even healthy fats. So I always have hard-boiled eggs. If you guys have an Instant Pot or a pressure cooker, cooking them in a pressure cooker is fast, and the shells come off just like that. So I always make a bunch of those. I have a bunch of canned seafood that I can just grab and go. Sausages, you can get lots of high-quality sausages without any weird additives at the store. Organic deli meat is something that you can also go, and I think Applegate is now partnered with Whole30, so a lot of their meats are Whole30 approved. And then there's nothing wrong with going to the store and getting a rotisserie chicken if you have to. And a lot of stores, that is like one of their items that they purposely lose money on, because they know how much people love them. And a lot of them that can just be seasoned with salt and pepper, and it doesn't have to have anything weird on it. So produce is very, very important. Like, everyone can agree, whether you're a vegan or hardcore paleo, vegetables and fruit are really good for you. Like, you need all those micronutrients in there. The fiber is really important to feed your good gut bacteria. because paleo is not a meat fest, even though that's what people think it is. And I think the reason why people think that is because like people like me were like vegetarian for a long, long time, and then they discovered paleo, and then they're like, I can eat meat again, and then they kind of went crazy on the meat and the bacon. But now, like I've been doing it for like 8 years, like I've actually gone away from that. I still eat meat, but it really is more like the size of my palm or my hand. But the rest of the plate is vegetables. And so I do try to buy in-season, pesticide-free produce. And you should eat the rainbow, because when you eat stuff with all sorts of different colors, that's actually indicative of all the different micronutrients and vitamins. And the wider variety, the better. And so here's an example of all the different colors that you can eat in fruits and vegetables. And so people always ask, like, do you always buy organic? And I don't. And the way I kind of decide which ones I do buy pesticide-free and which ones I don't are, there's the Environmental Working Group always puts out the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 list every year. Oh, and you guys don't have to worry about taking notes. At the very end, I have a little link that has all of these notes that you guys can download. But so the Dirty Dozen are the 12 fruits and vegetables that normally get the most pesticides. So if you can, those are the ones you should try to get pesticide-free or organic. And then the Clean 15 are vegetables that get very little pesticide normally. And a good example of that is, I don't even know if it's on that list. But asparagus is a good example. Oh, it is, number 8. Because it grows so fast, there isn't even time to kind of spray them with stuff. But you can, like, if you just go to Environmental Working Group, you can Google it and get the latest list. So again, just like emergency protein, I have emergency produce because I think as I said before, like when I first went paleo, I just ate so much meat and bacon that I wasn't eating as much produce as I wanted to. But now that I've discovered just how important your microbiome is in feeding your good gut bacteria with like fiber, I try to have produce every single meal. My kids, I try to stuff it in as much as possible. And so we have what I call emergency produce in our kitchen. So one of the biggies is our freezer has tons and tons of frozen vegetables because it's already pre-cut and pre-washed, and you can just dump it. Like if you're gonna make a pressure cooker stew, and everything's gonna be soft anyway, if you just dump in a bag of frozen vegetables, it's okay. Like it tastes good, it absorbs all the flavors. Pre-washed salad greens, like that forces me to just have salad, because another thing is as soon as you open it, it seems like it goes bad in like 2 days. And so as soon as it's open, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna throw salad on anything. Like people are always like, what do you eat this with? I'm like, a salad. Like just get a box of salad, it'll be the base for whatever you are serving. Baby kale and spinach I think is great too because it's pre-washed. You don't have to cut it. You can throw it into stir fries. You can eat it raw. So it's also something that is really quick in terms of adding vegetables. If you want, you can pay for convenience because stores these days will have pre-chopped, pre-spiralized vegetables. So again, you have no excuse not to cook them. And then I always try to stock up on stuff that you can eat raw. Like lettuce, carrots, cucumbers, radishes, bell peppers, because then you can just quickly eat them. And so healthy fats. So for a long time I thought all fat was bad and I avoided fats and I ate like no fat. But fat is really good. Healthy fats are good for you. And eating cholesterol does not necessarily increase your cholesterol level. And so I recommend that people throw away your bottles of highly processed omega-6 dominant vegetable oils. And instead you should stock up on ghee, rendered animal fats, coconut oil, avocado oil, and olive oil. So in terms of my regular cooking fats, I think probably avocado oil, olive oil, and ghee are the main ones that I cook with. And so these are also some more healthy fats. Saturated doesn't always mean bad, it just means they're stable. And so when I do high temperature cooking fat, it's normally ghee, olive oil, avocado oil. I used to use a lot of coconut oil because when I first started paleo, that was all that was available. But now I'm telling you, it's like you can get it at most stores. And the sesame oil and the nut oils, I don't normally cook with. I just kind of drizzle on afterwards just for the flavor because they aren't heat stable. So these are unhealthy fats that for a long time they were told, like, I mean, I remember growing up in, you know, the 70s and early 80s, and everyone's like, margarine is the way to go. Like, how amazing that we can come up with this like oil made from vegetables and it's so good for you. And now they're finding out that it may be, you know, contributing to the obesity problem that we have and our cardiovascular disease. And then all these vegetable oils, they probably are not the best thing for you as well, because they are, most of them are higher in omega-6, and everyone requires some omega-6, but it's a balance between omega-3 and omega-6. And they are highly, highly processed. So yeah, I mean, I remember for a long time, I was like, how can that be true? But now I'm a believer. And so this is a chart. Again, this will be in the slides that you guys can download. It's from my friend Diane Sanfilippo's Practical Paleo Cookbook. And so it's her guide to cooking fats, which ones are better for high temperature and low temperature. The olive oil is kind of the controversial one, because before everyone says don't cook with olive oil, but since then there's a lot of data that says it's perfectly fine to cook with olive oil. And so again, I always think it's always to be better to be prepared than not. And so I have emergency fats, especially when I'm traveling or I'm out and about. Like I'll get little packets of nut butter, you can get guacamole, like macadamia nuts I love, but sometimes I will eat too many of them. Dark chocolate, when I say dark chocolate, I mean not just dark colored, like 85% and above cacao. Because, you know, it's not super sweet, and it also has, you know, good fiber for your gut bacteria, or at least that's what I tell myself. And you'll find articles that say that. And then mayonnaise is a great, like you can actually find lots of paleo-friendly mayonnaise made with like avocado oil or good oils these days at the store. Like people, I still get like, because one of the big things when I first started blogging was like, you can make your own mayo because it's hard to find stuff with like good oils. And so everyone has like a mayo recipe, but you know, you're mixing two things that don't like to be together, like oil and water. And so everyone's like, oh, mine's breaking. I'm like, that's why you buy it now. That's what I do. Like, and so this is something I'm really excited about, is just the whole idea of feeding your microbiome or your good gut bacteria. And I kind of never thought about this until pretty recently. And I remember going to a talk with Dr. Justin Sonnenberg, who has a lab at Stanford. And he and his wife, this is their whole life's work, is to study the microbiome and just how important they are for our health. And so this is his quote: "The gut microbiota is the control center for multiple aspects of our biology, including our immune status, metabolism, and neurobiology. Many of the metabolic activities and developmental signals that the microbiota deploys are complementary to our own, affirming that humans are composite organisms consisting of microbial and human parts." So, I mean, he has this really great book called The Good Gut that you guys should buy. But it really made me think. I was like, it's not so much just me feeding myself, it's me feeding my gut bacteria, because the gut bacteria does so much to kind of keep this whole thing healthy. And so one of the ways to do that is to eat fermented foods, because a healthy and diverse gut flora may be critical to your overall health. And by eating these fermented foods, you are eating foods that naturally have, you know, probiotics in them. And so you should try to eat a variety of fermented foods daily. And like a lot of cultures have been eating fermented foods forever. You know, like there's kimchi, there's kvass, there's sauerkraut. And so it's kind of amazing that like ways that, you know, ancient cultures used to preserve foods also are beneficial, because it helps with, you know, your gut microbiome, but it also makes the food more nutrient dense, because like the bacteria makes it more bioavailable, and it also increases the umami. So there's just, it's just amazing. So I was like, you know, it's good to look in the past. Like, I know science is amazing, and I was brought up thinking that science is amazing, and it is. You guys do amazing things. But it's also good to kind of look in our past to say, wow, like this is kind of amazing. And they were doing these things kind of before they knew the why behind it. And so another big thing that I had to get over is to not be afraid of dirt. Like, I used to work in a hospital, and the night pharmacy is in the ICU. And so it's all about like putting on all the alcohol and like decontaminating. And I realized that I probably made my kid, like my older kid, like when he was born, we were like super sterile with him. And I think he actually developed like all these allergies because he was so clean. And so now I'll let my kids like, go a week without showering. And my parents are horrified by that. But I'm like, I don't know. I think it's good for you. I know. People have known me since I was in college because I was very different in the 90s because I was all about better science through chemistry, and I was going to be a food scientist and join the flavor industry. Like now that they know me, they're like, what would Michelle from the 90s think of Michelle today? I was like, she would hate her and she would make so much fun of her. But the Michelle today doesn't care because, you learn and you grow. And so these are examples of fermented foods. I know that some of them seem kind of wacky and crazy, and you don't have to eat it all. Just try it, Try a little bit of kimchi, and it's always good to eat it with something else. Like people are like, I ate this kimchi and it was like spicy and sour and I don't like it. It's like, well, try it on something and it might be delicious. Like I have a kimchi fried cauliflower rice on the blog. That's a really delicious way to try kimchi for the first time. And then people are like, oh, but when you're cooking it, you're killing the probiotics. And yes, you could be, but at the same time, people have said that even the dead bacteria, that might still help your immune system. So there's all, just try it and it'll be good. If you tolerate dairy, yogurt is a great fermented food. Just make sure you don't get the super high sugar ones with all sorts of food dyes, which are the ones that we normally feed our children. So one of the things I love talking about is umami. And fermented foods are a food that is high in umami. And what umami is, it's a loan word from the Japanese meaning savory taste. And it's the fifth taste. So besides salty, sweet, sour, and bitter, there's this indescribable taste called umami, which is like this savoriness or this meatiness. So if you've eaten something and it's like not one of the other four tastes, it's umami. And it's really in all the foods that people love, like bacon, tomato paste, dried mushrooms, anchovies, like all these foods that cultures have typically added to like their most delicious like national dishes. Those are the things that boost umami. And once you know which ingredients boost umami, you should totally use it and stockpile it because your food will taste delicious. And there's an institute in Japan where they study umami and they study how much glutamate and all this other stuff. But they've actually shown when you combine foods that have umami, instead of it just being 1 + 1 = 2, it exponentially increases your perception of umami. So that's why I tell people that they should figure out which ones, and I will tell you which ones. So these are kind of the basic things I think everyone should stock, if you're gonna cook paleo. I love Diamond Crystal Kosher Salt, and it's the red box, not the blue Morton's. And it's not so much that it tastes better or has special minerals. It's just because the crystals are bigger. So if you're a beginner cook and you're trying to kind of salt to taste and you're not really sure what that means, it's way more forgiving. You can grab some and sprinkle it, and then you can taste it, and you can add more instead of it being a really fine salt. And when you put it on, you're like, it's too salty. I don't know what to do. I'm never cooking again, which has happened to me. So with Diamond Crystal, it's way more forgiving. This is what chefs give to their newbies that are coming into their kitchens, because you can start learning by feel how much to add. Coconut aminos is a soy sauce replacement. It has neither soy nor gluten. It is made from fermented coconut sap, so it's brown and it looks like soy sauce. And because it's fermented, it has lots of umami and lots of glutamate. It's a little bit sweeter, so I like to combine it with fish sauce to kind of give it the right balance. And then I always have what I call basic boosters like onions, ginger, lemongrass, garlic. And then sofrito is something that's used in many, many cultures, which is diced carrots, onions, and celery. And depending on the culture, it can change a little bit. But it's diced up, it's sauteed in your favorite cooking fat. And then what I do is I make a big batch of it, and then I freeze it in ice cube molds. And so then when you're cooking and you don't have time because it's a weeknight, you can pop out one of these cubes that you've already spent all this time developing flavor, and it's like a flavor bomb that you can throw into your Instant Pot with whatever you're gonna make as a stew. Dried mushrooms I love because they never go bad. They add so much flavor. Like the difference between a dried shiitake mushroom and a fresh shiitake mushroom in terms of amount of umami is huge. And it's true, like when you've had a dish, like a Chinese dish with dried shiitake mushrooms, it really does taste so much better. And it's not slimy like the fresh shiitakes. Spice blends are super important. That will just jazz things up. Like if you think salt and pepper is boring, there's nothing wrong with buying prepared sauces. I buy like Rayo's marinara sauce. I buy Thai curry paste. There are salsas I like. Just read the labels to make sure they're compliant. I have broth. There's broth that I made myself that I've frozen, but these days you can buy broth at most stores without wacky ingredients. Bacon is a condiment, despite what a lot of people say. And fish sauce is magical. People are always like, I hate fish. It smells disgusting, and it does, but you just add a little bit, and that amount makes it delicious. And that's why, like, when people go to Vietnamese places or Thai places, and they try to recreate that dish at home, but they don't have fish sauce, they're like, something is missing. It doesn't taste as good as the fish sauce. The fish sauce is the umami booster. And so here I've highlighted the things that are high in umami, and you can see that most of the stuff I recommend is just stock these things and you'll be good. And so this is another another spice blend, high in umami, that is you don't have to buy it because actually you can't find them at Whole Foods anymore because it's sold out. But if you can, they will be at the butcher counter. But this is a spice blend that I developed for our cookbook, and it's in our app, so you guys can just make it. But it's pulverized porcini mushrooms, some salt and some herbs and a little bit of pepper, and you just use it in place of salt. Like people are like, it is salty. I'm like, yes, you use it in place of salt, but it's less salty than just using salt. But because you've added the mushrooms, it adds like this extra dimension to everything. So like whenever you're in doubt, you can just use it in place of salt. And then these are what I call flavor finishers or extra credit, and I guess as scientists, I'm sure all of you guys love extra credit. Because these are the little things that make your food taste better at the end. And that's like fresh herbs, freshly ground black pepper really does taste better than the stuff that comes in a can. Fresh chili peppers will add brightness and bite. And acids and vinegars are like one of my favorite ways to punch up a dish at the end. So I always have balsamic vinegar, sherry vinegar, all sorts of vinegars. I think every vinegar is Whole30 friendly except malt vinegar. So you can go to town on your vinegars. And citrus, like lemon juice, lime juice, always in my fridge. And these are kind of bonus pantry items that I'm gonna go over really quickly because I don't really recommend that people have them. Because if you're someone that has a big sweet tooth like me, if you have like all of these alternative flours and sweeteners to make paleo treats, you're gonna make them if you have them. So I actually will go and buy them because they're always super expensive. And so I'll only buy like one and then I feel the pain and I'll really cherish it, as opposed to if I have all this stuff to make it, I would just make it all the time. And that's why my cookbooks and my blog have almost no desserts. But the ones in there are the ones I love, and I've tested many, many times. Just because I can't do it. I mean, I know myself, and I know that I just like them too much. So people ask about drinks. They're like, is all you can drink water? And I'm like, kinda, no. But you can make spa water, fancy water with herbs and fruit. Kombucha is a great thing to drink to your coffee. I always recommend it before noon because it takes a while to get out of your system. Coconut water is a good drink. Nut milks occasionally, because I know people can go crazy on those. People ask about alcohol, like that's a big question. And they're like, do you not drink alcohol because you're paleo? And I'm like, no, I don't drink alcohol because I'm Asian. And I'm missing the enzymes that really help me enjoy it. But I think if you can drink alcohol, many people do. There are lots of wines these days that are supposed to not have hangovers and stuff, but I don't know too much about them just because I don't drink. People drink cider, if they're like, I love beer, cider is a good alternative that a lot of people like. There's something that Rob Wolf, who's one of the big original paleo people, he has a drink that he created called the NorCal Margarita, which I think is mineral water, lime juice, and tequila. And so those are your options. But again, I mean, I don't think you should never drink alcohol because I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but you know, just do it responsibly. And so snacks, people are like, what do you snack on? And so you should really ask yourself, is it really necessary? Are you really hungry or you're just bored? Because when I used to work nights, I used to pack myself really fun snacks. And I would make time to eat those snacks. But then I realized when I switched out those fun snacks and just had a can of sardines, I was never really that hungry. So I think that's a way that you can test yourself. And so if you really are hungry, like if you're just starting out and you're trying to figure out how much to eat because you know you've cut out like all these grains and you're trying to kind of make up for stuff, eat a mini meal. Make sure that you have a little protein, fat, vegetables, and make it kind of boring. Make sure your pantry doesn't have all this exciting dark chocolate macadamia nuts because you can go crazy on those things even though they're technically okay. And so these are kind of some things that I pack in my carry-on, like if I'm on a flight, like nuts, jerky, eggs. They have all these like meat bars now, so there's lots of stuff that you can kind of stock up. But I'm telling you, that can of sardines is like, because it's really nutritious and really good for you, and you will only eat it if you're really, really hungry and you don't want to annoy everyone around you. So this is a sample paleo meal, right? So there's lots of vegetables, there's some fermented kimchi. I would eat at least another one, but for the picture, Henry was like, let's just put one crackling chicken on there. But in reality, I will eat at least 2 thighs. You know, there's nuts, fruit, and then some fancy spa water. So my take-home points are you should really, really make an effort to cook most of your meals at home. Think of it like brushing your teeth, right? Just make an effort, and you don't have to be perfect. Aim to stay the course, but perfection really is unsustainable. Think of paleo as kind of this true north, and there are times when you might veer off, but you can just hop back on the course and have fun and eat well. And so these are the resources. Again, you don't have to copy all this down because it'll all be on the next slide, and I'll tell you guys what to copy down. Because I have a whole post on my blog about how to stock your paleo pantry. Both the books talk about how to stock your paleo pantry. I just wrote a guest post on the Whole Foods Market blog about how to shop. Those are our 2 books, and this is our little family. And so right there, the slides are at http://nom.gy/, and then the caps do matter. So capital P and then the LL and L at the end. But you can download all these slides. You can find me at NON-NEGOTIABLE and on social media at NON-NEGOTIABLE.